Now it is.
Okay, hello, my name is Tyler Ballatin, and I will be explaining a little bit about the California grizzly. And so my first question is going to be, did you know the bear on our flag had a name? His name was Samson. He was a 1,500-pound grizzly captured by John Grizzly Adams. And in his biography, The Adventures of John Capon Adams, mountaineer and grizzly bear hunter of California, he was, quote, the largest specimen of the grizzly species ever caught. That was back in the winter of 1874, 50 years before the last grizzly in the state was shot in Tulare County in 1920. And according to the CGA, or the California Grizzly Alliance, we went from 10,000 bears in the state to 0. Today, we're going to discuss the grizzly bear, their role in our ecology, some commonly held misconceptions about them, and explaining their path to reintroduction in the state. And so first I'd like to address the problem. We killed all of them. And the continued problem they have. The grizzlies have an image problem in California. They're seen as cattle killers that sweep forests clear of all of the deer and everything else. And that's just not true. The reality is that their diet was a majority of plants, according to Peter S. Algona of UCSB. In fact, acorns from our native oaks made up a majority of their diet. And even after Europeans came into the picture, quoted from the California Grizzly Alliance, or the CGA, the proportion of terrestrial protein in grizzly diets did double. And that made it about 70% herbivorous still. And so native relationships with the grizzlies were different. We have no evidence of any active hunting by any tribes in California. Quoted from the CGA again, we have evidence from the Central Coast and the Sierra Nevadas that show that people sometimes kept captive grizzlies. The Spanish vaqueros were different. They shot and lassoed these animals for sport and status, and the industry they brought into the state further complicated things, as when they would slaughter their cattle, the scent would bring grizzly bears out of the forests, and they would act as scavengers, as they would sometimes do. This unwanted contact certainly fueled resentment and painted these huge animals as carnivorous pests. We now know that grizzlies were environmental engineers, not boogeymen of the forests. They helped with seed dispersal, spreading the forests across the state, keeping our state green. They helped clear our forests, acting as scavengers, clearing away carcasses that other animals wouldn't touch. And of course, they were apex predators, keeping deer, elk, and wolves all under control. Currently, their biggest issue is with Californians. It's terrifying to imagine going out into your backyard and seeing one of these things. But as we've discussed previously, their major roles were actually habitat restoration and maintenance, chief among them. And we've been unable to make up for their absences, and our ecology is suffering because of it. So the question is, how should we go about bringing them back? Well, lucky for us, there are proposals out there already. The CGA has found that it is feasible to bring them back, and they have 2 places that they can put them in the state. The first one is in the central eastern portion of the Sierra Nevadas. Think around the Sequoias National Parks. The second would be in the northwestern tip of the state, centered around the Six Rivers National Forest. And these are large, uninterrupted habitats with no large urban centers and no agricultural land anywhere around them. To further bolster the security of the people living around these places, there's an additional 50-kilometer buffer area where we would expect these grizzlies to roam. And the bigger obstacle is going to be us, the uninformed population of California, because the reality does not line up with our perception of these guys. Bears avoid high traffic areas. As discussed previously, they're mostly herbivorous, and outside of the odd cattle rancher, for which these grizzlies would need to go outside of that 50-kilometer buffer zone, we don't have anything to worry about. We're not a big enough catch for these grizzlies. There's going to be no grizzlies camping outside of our town. We're not worth it. The biggest thing that the CGA has taken from past reintroduction campaigns is to listen to the locals who this will affect the most. These locals are going to need investment, education, and we are going to need to empower them if they're going to successfully cohabitate with these grizzlies. One strategy that has been looked into is to seek help from tribes who have historically had relations with these grizzlies, such as the Yurok here in California. Through their involvement in education and empowerment, we're going to be reviving native practices lost to time. We're going to be addressing those rural communities and their concerns, and we'll be creating stewardship opportunities to facilitate the return of our state's bear. Now I want you to imagine that greener California. We're going to have forests spreading across the state again. We are going to have our chaparral ecosystems heal themselves, all without our involvement. We're not going to have herds of bears in the valley, but if you go deep into those pine forests, you might see one digging up for roots and acorns. Now to wrap all of this up, our job as the people of California is to build support for this program. This is going to be a generational program that we are laying the groundwork for. Awareness is going to be the first hurdle to jump over. And so I'd implore you to go look at the California Grizzly Alliance's site and go through their About Us. If you like what they're talking about, ask around, family, friends, everyone, how would you feel if our bear came back to the state? Maybe so loud. That's it.